Hey guys, welcome back to this Breed Your Own Live Food series. Today we're going to talk about superworms, how to breed your own superworms. Stay tuned. So let's get straight into it. By the end of this video, you'll know absolutely everything you need to know, a load of hints, tips, tricks, everything you need to know to breed your own Morio worms. We call them Morios in the UK. In the US, they're called superworms. Let's go. So step number one, what you need to do is go down the pet shop, your local reptile shop, pick yourself up a couple of tubs of Morio worms or superworms and chuck them in a big tub. I feed mine on a substrate of oats and then I chuck in a bit of apple. You can see a bit of fruit there, that's just a piece of apple. I use banana peels mainly because I don't like anything to go to waste. So every time my little lad has a banana, the peel goes in with the Morio worms and also the mealworms, and they absolutely thrive off it. They don't need a water dish or water crystals or anything like that. They get all their moisture from the moisture content that's inside the fruit that you do feed them. It's always better to, when you just first get the Morio worms, just leave them to gut load, let them eat, let them rehydrate after being in storage in the pet shop, and after that you can start separating them. Superworms, they will not pupate. They're in a few different stages. So they get the worm stage, which is classed as the larva stage, as you see here. Then they go into a pupa stage, which is like a caterpillar's catalyst. And then they hatch out of that into a Morio worm darkling beetle. That's the general gist of how to do it. It sounds simple because it is simple. You've got to separate them into these little tubs. You can use any tubs. I use these little tubs, little 1 ounce deli cups with the lid on. Separate them all, put them all into those little containers, and then put them in that shoebox somewhere nice and dark so they feel safe and they will pupate like that. Only really do this with fully grown Morio worms and superworms, just so you get a decent quality beetle out of it. Separate them into those containers, and then after about 2 to 3 weeks they start to pupate. Don't give them any food or moisture content while they are in that state. As you can see here is an open box that I'm storing, and there's not any food, there's not any moisture content, there's an air hole in the top of every single container. It just prolongs the pupa stage. It takes them longer to pupate if you do give them a moisture source or a food source. So just leave them bare like that. They curl up into these little tiny balls like this, and that is a few days before it pupates. Now I sell these beetles to anybody who wants to have a bit of a boost start into the breeding stage. Here you see one of the pupa. I've got thousands of tubs, thousands of these little tubs, all full of worms, all pupating at the same time. That is what a pupa looks like. Now when they're in this stage, they don't need any heat, no water, no nothing, no food. They won't eat, but they still need to breathe. They do breathe. Occasionally you'll see them wriggle around. That's just them being a little bit active. It's like a hibernation state, as some would say. Once they do get into this stage, you can take it out of the little tub, stick them all in another tub all together, and just let them pupate. Stick another worm in that tub, and off you start the process again. This is the tub I use to put them all in. Now you'll see little black dots and brown rubbish there. They shed their skin before they go into the pupa stage, and that's what you see in there. If you look carefully, you might see the odd one wriggle around a little bit. And here we move on to a close-up shot of the pupa stage. As you can see, there's a few little wriggling around there, nothing special, some shed skin in there as well. But when they do hatch out of this stage, they turn into little beetles, just like this. They're actually quite large beetles, and then I move them into a container, again with oats as a substrate. They will eat that, they'll lay their eggs in that. They've got a few dark hiding places underneath that egg crate, and I just leave them to do their business. I feed them on a bit of, again, banana peel, apple, nothing too wet, but something with a moisture content. I have them in this darker container just because they seem to be a lot more active when it is dark. I do like everybody learning from my mistakes, so it's always better to have a lid on top of this container just because occasionally, very rarely, but occasionally, they can fly. 2 weeks after they do metamorphosis out of the pupa stage, that's about the time they could become sexually mature. When they go jet black just like this, that's when they're sexually mature. That's when they'll start doing the dance with no pants and start laying the eggs in the substrate of oats. You can keep these at room temperature. I prefer a little bit hotter than room temperature, so I have these on top of my boa constrictor's enclosure. It's a little bit warmer there, but not too hot that it's going to do any damage to them. So after you've watched them and they've hatched out and they're like this a few weeks later, they've laid their eggs and stuff like that, give it around about 2 to 3 weeks before you start moving the beetles out. Now I move the beetles into a new enclosure and I separate all the substrate into a different container. All the baby Morio worms will be in the substrate. There'll be eggs inside the substrate, and you don't want your beetles to eat the eggs. So after about 3 weeks, after they've become sexually mature, get them out, and this is what you see. You'll see all the little substrate just moving away gently. That's the little Morio worms crawling around underneath the substrate. Top tip, when you are supplying a moisture source for the babies, rip it up into little pieces and dot it all the way around. The worms are only small, they can't get from one side of the enclosure to the other side just to get their food. So now the beetles, they're in a different enclosure with new substrate, laying more eggs. By this time, I've had more worms have pupated and gone into the beetle stage, so they've got new beetles in there as well. Here's a couple of shots of a couple of the little babies inside the enclosure after the beetles have been removed. Top tip number 2, all the banana peels that have gone off that you fed your beetles, leave them in there, because chances are there's some eggs that have been laid on top of it, in it and around it. So just let the eggs hatch out, and about 3 weeks after you've separated the beetles, that's when you can start removing some of the old banana peel and the old moisture source. So then a quick summary, you can see the little 1 ounce dishes on the left hand side. Then there's the beetle enclosure, the newborn baby enclosures with the eggs, and then finally the slightly older Morio worms. I keep them separated. Every single clean out, every time I take the beetles out, that substrate goes into a totally different enclosure, just to help sorting them out, makes it a lot simpler. And it's as simple as that. Let's have a quick summary. You get your Morio worms or your superworms from the shop, you gut load them for a few days, and then you start to separate them. Separate them into single little cups, that way they'll pupate. Then when they do pupate, get them out of the little enclosures, all into a big tray. As and when they do turn into beetles, which normally takes around 2 weeks, then you can put them all together, leave them together for a few weeks, takes 2 weeks for them to become sexually mature. They start doing the dance, jobs are good, and they'll lay their eggs. They'll hatch the eggs, and then you can grow the Morio worms from babies to adults, and then feed them off to your animals just like I am now. It really is as simple as that. Not only does it save you an absolute fortune over time, because these do breed quite rapidly, not only does it save you a bit of money, it's also fun to do with the kids. The kids can get involved with this. If you are a child, you can do this on your own. It's always such a rewarding feeling when you're feeding your animals with the insects that you've gut loaded, you've bred them, you've raised them, you did everything. They can be fed off to absolutely any reptile, any animal that's an insectivore, basically. You can feed it to your bearded dragon like I am here. You can feed it off to the Bosque monitor, just like I am here. He absolutely loves my homebred Morio worms, but for some reason he'll turn his nose up at the shop brought ones. I don't know why that is. You can feed them to hedgehogs, you can feed them to leopard geckos, absolutely any animal. So guys, that brings us to the end of this video. I do hope it's helped you. I do hope it's inspired you. If you have enjoyed it, hit the thumbs up button, like and subscribe to the channel, and I shall see you all next time.